So, good evening. Our topic for today would be asthma, pediatric asthma. So, I'll start discussing by highlighting important points and then give examples along the way. So, as defined, asthma is a chronic inflammatory disorder of the airways in which many cells and cellular elements play a role. There's associated airway hyperresponsiveness, and then you will have recurrent episodes of wheezing, breathlessness, chest tightness, and coughing. As for the airway hyperresponsiveness, this actually leads to bronchoconstriction, which gives you the signs and symptoms. And you will have, but this is often reversible, either spontaneously or with treatment. So this is the concept of reversibility is very important when it comes to asthma because if the patient, for example, if the patient is having an acute exacerbation. For example, a 2 year old or a 4 year old came in or was brought by the mother because of difficulty of breathing. And then you started trial therapy of short acting beta agonist. And then the patient's symptoms disappeared or become lessened. So that is an indication that the patient has asthma. So aside from the airway hyperresponsiveness, there's also airway edema, and then there is a lot of mucus production. So for the pathogenesis of asthma, you will have here a Th1. So, for example, the patient will have the genes or for the environmental exposures. Usually, the triggering factor for asthma is not just gene, not just environmental exposure, but the interplay between the two. So, the genes, for example, the patient has a family history of asthma, or the mother has asthma, father has asthma, then it increases the likelihood of that child to acquire asthma. And then environmental exposures like certain allergens that causes them to become causes their airway to become hyper responsive, then that will also trigger asthma. What is important here is the interleukin 5. The way I remember interleukin 5 would be since interleukin 5 is an important cytokine, and then since it's asthma, then we will see peripheral eosinophilia either in the blood or in the sputum smear. So for IL-5, since eosinophilia is the fifth letter in the alphabet, so that's how I remember. Um, so with all said, what is asthma? The answer is it's inflammation. So you have to know that asthma is an inflammatory process because this is how this is how we manage asthma. The concept that it is a disease that is caused by certain inflammatory cascades gives us the way on how to manage the patient with asthma. So acute exacerbation is defined as temporary worsening of symptoms. We can have as part of natural history. And then, um, for example, a patient has insidious type of asthma or intrinsic type of asthma wherein there is no known triggering factor, but the patient just gets hyperreactive. So like when they get mild colds or cough, and then the next couple of days or the next couple of hours they get worse, or can even be due to exposure to smoke or even due to cutting the grass. So any factor, anything can trigger asthma. So here, this is a very good diagram. I'll just have to minimize it first. So this is a very good diagram wherein it explains the pathogenesis of asthma. So when you have asthma, there is inflammation and swelling. So since asthma is an inflammatory process, you expect inflammatory cells to infiltrate the lumen of the blood vessels, and then as the air goes in, and then it as the air goes in, and then you try to exhale or expire the air, and since the lumen of the airway is obstructed, then the patient will have air trapping. And as the air goes out, You will hear wheezing because the lungs is trying to release air, but due to the obstructed airway, it cannot. So, one important factor to take note is that not everything that wheezes is asthma, and asthma doesn't always wheeze. But if you get a history of that the patient already has asthma, then you hear wheezing, that's a sign that the patient is in acute exacerbation. So here you will see excess mucus. So it's very important because, for example, the patient's only symptom is incessant coughing. So why do they cough and cough? Because they're trying to get rid of the excess mucus that is produced by the blood vessels or the airways themselves. So how do we, this is a nice diagram of asthma, but to sum it all up, so how do we, um, what do we ask or what do we look for in terms of history of asthma? So you look if there is any past history of wheezing, so if there is any allergies or atopy, or there is such a thing as as an exercise-induced asthma, wherein, for example, uh, a teenager, usually an active or an athletic teenager, um, when she does sports or when she joins sports, she then starts coughing and coughing and then progress to shortness of breathing. So how do you confirm that this attack is due to primarily asthma? So you start giving oral beta or can be inhaled beta agonist for trial therapy. So if that shortness of breathing or that wheezing or coughing stopped or decreased, then you confirm the diagnosis of asthma. And then you can also ask for family history of asthma. So for another one is you look for recurrent history of asthma because, for example, the patient has had recurrent attacks, and then due to this recurrent attacks he was hospitalized, or then he needed intubation. So that tells you the severity of his symptoms. um, but don't forget that less than 2 years old would also get recurrent bronchiolitis, which will also cause recurrent wheezing in the patient. So just be very careful in your history and PE. So another important um, is you get the how do you, for the clinical manifestations. Usually the BP, the vital signs are unremarkable. So, but then again, if it's unremarkable, what do you look for? It's the usually it's the respiratory rate that is increased. If it's if it's if for example you have a patient that has um, um, an increased uh, an increased respiratory rate. So this is a nice table. You'll see that this is at the age group, and this is the normal rate per age group. So if the respiratory rate of an individual falls behind or above the normal rate of that age group, that specific age group, then you can say that the patient has tachypnea or increased work of breathing. So this is another nice table for doing or for getting the pulse rate. The how do you determine the normal limits? It's usually this one. So if you have preschool aged 1 to 2 years old, normally the heart rate should only be below 120, and so on and so forth. Then for the another physical findings, I'll just highlight the pale looking dusky nail beds. So cyanotic nail beds usually signify chronic hypoxemia. So the patient has already a long standing lack of oxygen. So how most people with this kind of disease is diseases are those with cystic fibrosis. You also get hyperresonant chest on percussion because you have trapped air inside the lungs. Therefore, you will have increased resonance when you percuss the chest or the thorax of the patient. So, also another clue is you have an increased or prolonged expiratory phase. So, normally we inspire longer than we expire, but in asthmatic patients, since they do not have since they have a hyperreactive airway which obstructs the entry and the exit of of the air, and they will have a shorter inspiratory than the expiratory phase. So it will sound like because they inspire a lot less because uh, since they are not able to expire the air that normally a person should expire during the normal breathing cycle, and there is a trapped air, there will be little space for the inspired air to go. So they will have a short um, inspiratory phase, and then they will try to exhale a lot more than they should because they're trying to get the trapped air inside the lung out. So they may also have decreased breath sounds, and then they can even have crackles. So in asthma in acute exacerbation, you usually find a wheezing. So and then sometimes you can even find rales, rhonchi, and this will suggest upper airway problem. There are cases when you can palpate liver, not because the liver is enlarged, but because when there is air trapping, the diaphragm is pushed down, and then the liver is also further pushed down. So your liver or the patient's liver is much easier to palpate. So how do you diagnose? Um, diagnose asthma clinically. So it's not it's not written here, but I'll just say it. So asthma in children, of course, there is no specific test to tell you that the child has asthma, because most of the time um, children who are brought to the clinics are those that are at earlier age. So for example, you have a 3-year-old patient, so you cannot, of course, that 3-year-old patient, you cannot instruct that patient to secure his mouth onto the spirometry and then blow as hard and as fast as he can. So usually they won't cooperate, these patients won't cooperate. So you diagnose asthma clinically if you see wheezing, if you if you hear wheezing rather, if you see that the patient is in respiratory distress, if you see increased rate of respiratory rate, then you get on history trigger like allergens, or you see skin manifestations like in atopy, you see edematous turbinates, then probably that's the most probably that's asthma. So you can also diagnose asthma through getting the blood or the sputum, although it's not necessarily done, but you can see eosinophilia. You can also use skin testing. So skin testing doesn't tell you that the patient has asthma, but it tells you that that the patient has allergies to certain products. Another important way to diagnose asthma is through pulmonary function test. So if you're getting the pulmonary function test, make sure that the patient is cooperative. So um, if the patient is cooperative, you can do spirometry, and then if you record that it's below the 80% predictive value, you can give short acting bronchodilators, and then retest the pulmonary function test, and then see if there's improvement in the FEV1 over FVC. So if it does improve, then you have a diagnosis that it's asthma. So another important um, laboratory to do is the chest x-ray. Why do we do chest x-ray? It's not because we want to see the flattened diaphragm, we want to see the air trapping, the increased intercostal space. You don't order chest x-ray just because you want to see those, because if you're already if you already are seeing signs and symptoms of asthma, then you can already predict that when you do chest x-ray you will see those things. But why do we do chest x-ray? Remember that in asthma, you know that some asthma are insidious, and then um, if a patient gets mild cough and then presents with an acute exacerbation, we're now trying to rule out if the asthma is exacerbated by any lung infections like pneumonia. So if you're considering pneumonia, you can see infiltrates, you can see bilateral patchy or you can even see lung consolidations and so on and so forth. So you do chest x-ray for that matter. Another important diagnostic test to be done is the blood gas or the ABGs. They are helpful during acute attack, especially if the patient is already presenting with severe distress. So initially, what do you see in a blood gas? You will note that the patient has been, if you will note that if the patient has been hyperventilating, of course you will expect that the patient's pH will increase, meaning it's becoming more and more alkalosis, because if the pediatric patient is blowing off CO2, then of course you will have a more alkalotic a respiratory alkalosis. And then in the moderate type of the asthma, um, moderate type of asthma, you will see that the patient's CO2 is already starting to rise. So this is already a clue for you, if you're a physician, that the patient is already getting tired. So probably he's not blowing off CO2 as much more than during his first initial phase. So watch out for that patient, because you watch them closely, because if the patient now has an increased CO2, and then the patient's pH is already decreased to the point that you can you establish a metabolic acidosis, then there might be a need for intubation, because of course all of the buffers are already used up, and then you expect the patient to die if you'll not intervene in these kinds of situation. So what's important? So in summary, so in summary, you have to be very vigilant when it comes to diagnosing asthma, because for example, you you do the history and PE, but uh, you don't intervene. For example, you saw a patient. The patient is already having nasal flaring, intercostal retractions. You can already see that lips are turning blue, or so on and so forth. You will see that he is in severe respiratory distress, and you'll only get the history and PE, then that's not a good sign of that you're managing your patient well, because take note that the average time of getting your history and PE is within 15 minutes. So if for example you got a complete history and PE, and then you did not manage your patient during those times, then what's the use of having a final diagnosis if your patient is dead, right? So you can't wait for that long. So while examining, or during the time of examination or getting the history, you should be already giving your best initial treatment. And what is that? You give oxygen, and you give the short acting beta agonist. So why am I emphasizing about the short acting? Because there are medications that are long acting, and then note that asthma, especially in acute exacerbations, um, will make the patient lose um, retain CO2 faster than any other illnesses. So if you're waiting for that long acting, for example, long acting beta agonist to respond, like for example salmeterol. If you use salmeterol, that's a long acting beta agonist. If you use that, and you know already that the patient is in acute exacerbation, then um, you might put the patient in danger, because you will not address the hyper responsiveness in 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 as much as possible, as fast as possible. So another thing is you have to give inhaled corticosteroid. So is a while ago I said that inflammation is the pathophysiology of asthma. So, for example, you give a short acting beta agonist, right? And then you give oxygen, and then, of course, you relieve the symptoms of the patient. So, if you're asked what will alleviate the signs and symptoms of asthma, you will answer oxygen and then the inhaled rapid beta agonist. But if you're asked what will take care of the pathophysiology of asthma, that is the inflammation or the airway hyperresponsiveness, you will answer inhaled corticosteroids, because corticosteroids, since asthma is an inflammation, then it's just natural for you to give anti-inflammatory. So that's it for there is a table that gives you um, on how to manage asthma in terms of classification, like mild, moderate, then intermittent and persistent. But I'll leave it to you to study, because explaining it here will give will give more confusion, I think, because if what's the technique in studying the recommended medications by level of severity. it's how you it's how you reconcile into yourself that in for example, in mild and in intermittent type of severity, you give inhaled corticosteroids, but that is also what you give in moderate. But the only difference is that you increase the dose. So I'm leaving the the assignment to you to read the management of asthma.